The fluorescent lights of Terminal 1 at Chicago O'Hare International Airport buzzed with the low, relentless hum of late-night aviation. Outside the towering glass windows, rain lashed against the tarmac, reflecting the amber glow of taxiway lights and the towering tail fins of Boeing 777s preparing for long-haul journeys across the Atlantic. Inside Gate B12, the boarding line for Flight 884, bound for London Heathrow, stretched halfway down the concourse. Hundreds of passengers, tired business executives, families with sleeping toddlers, and tourists clutching passports, shuffled forward, eager to step onto the massive wide-body aircraft. Word had already spread among the gate agents and passengers. Command of tonight's flagship route belonged to Captain Clinton Scott. At 35 years old, Clinton was the youngest chief pilot in the entire history of the airline. His name was spoken with genuine reverence throughout the corporate towers in downtown Chicago and crew lounges across 3 continents. Senior captains twice his age sought his counsel on complex flight operations. Executives trusted him with the airline's most sensitive routes and high-profile inaugural flights. Passengers felt an unspoken sense of total security the moment his calm, resonant voice came over the cabin intercom. Clinton stood near the forward boarding door in his tailored Navy uniform, 4 gold stripes shimmering on his shoulders. His 6'2" frame exuded natural authority, but his posture carried no arrogance. He spoke warmly to the gate manager, checking off the final passenger count with a disciplined smile. Then, the jet bridge door opened, and a newly assigned flight attendant stepped onto the aircraft, carrying a stack of warm blankets for the first-class cabin. Her name was Anna Bush. Clinton looked up from his clipboard. For a fraction of a second, the noise of the bustling terminal, the chime of boarding passes, and the steady hum of the jet engines seemed to fade into complete silence. She was young, dressed in the standard Navy uniform of the cabin crew, but there was something entirely different about her presence. It wasn't just her striking, natural grace or the gentle tilt of her chin, it was her eyes, clear, soft, and carrying a depth of inner stillness that felt completely out of place in the high-pressure world of international aviation. Clinton had interacted with thousands of flight attendants over his decade in the sky. Yet, as Anna offered a polite, respectful nod toward the flight deck and moved down the aisle to assist an anxious mother with an unruly carry-on bag, Clinton found himself entirely unable to look away. What Captain Clinton Scott did not know in that fleeting moment was that the composed, intelligent young woman standing before him carried a secret weight. She had raised herself from the deepest shadows of poverty, from a forgotten, dust-choked rural community outside Chicago, where her family had been systematically mocked, demeaned, and written off by society for decades. And no one in that bustling airport, not the senior pilots, not the airline executives, and certainly not the arrogant neighbors who had spent 20 years belittling her family, could have ever predicted that America's youngest chief pilot would one day drive down a rutted gravel road, kneel inside a tiny weathered house, and humbly ask for her hand in marriage. 35 miles southwest of the gleaming skyscrapers of Chicago lay the forgotten township of Oak Creek. It was a rural expanse dominated by abandoned gravel pits, weathered farm machinery, and dead-end dirt roads that turned into thick, impassable mud whenever the Midwest rains fell. At the very end of Miller's Lane stood the Bush residence. Calling it a house was an act of generosity. It was a small, single-story structure built in the 1950s, its wooden siding worn into a dull grey. The porch leaned slightly to the left, held up by reinforced oak posts that Anna's father had salvaged from a discarded barn. In the freezing Illinois winters, the wind howled through hairline cracks in the window panes, forcing the family to bundle in heavy hand-me-down blankets around a modest cast-iron wood stove in the living room. Anna's father, Thomas Bush, was a man whose hands bore the permanent marks of hard labor. He worked as an independent repairman, taking on the odd jobs nobody else wanted, fixing lawnmowers, repairing broken tractors, and clearing clogged septic lines for local farmers. He was a man of few words, but his eyes carried an unbreakable dignity. Her mother, Martha, worked long, brutal hours at a local commercial laundry facility 12 miles away, her fingers raw from boiling water and harsh detergents. Despite their back-breaking work, poverty clung to the Bush family like a shadow that refused to lift. "Look at them!" A neighbor named Richard Miller would sneer, leaning against his polished pickup truck as 10-year-old Anna walked down the dusty roadside carrying her worn canvas school backpack. Richard was a prosperous local contractor who owned half the equipment rental businesses in the township. Thomas Bush has been working 14 hours a day since 1980 and still can't afford a gravel driveway. Some folks are just born to stay at the bottom of the pile. The children in the township absorbed the cruelty of their parents like sponges. At school, Anna was an outcast. She wore faded jeans that were 3 inches too short and shoes patched with heavy duct tape on the inner seams. During lunch breaks, while other children unpicked lunchboxes filled with brand-name snacks and juice pouches, Anna quietly opened a small brown paper bag containing a simple piece of homemade cornbread and an apple from her father's solitary backyard tree. "Hey, Anna! Is your dad coming to fix our toilet today?" a boy named Marcus, Richard Miller's son, shouted across the cafeteria, sparking a wave of mean-spirited laughter from the surrounding tables. "My dad said your family is so poor you don't even have indoor plumbing." Anna's cheeks burned with heat, but she kept her eyes fixed straight ahead. She never threw an apple, she never yelled back, and she never let a single tear spill over her eyelashes while anyone was watching. One frigid November evening, after walking home in the biting rain, Anna sat on the edge of her small twin bed, staring out the cracked window. Her thin coat was soaked through, and her feet were numb. Downstairs, she could hear the hushed conversation of her parents. "We're $40 short on the heating oil this month, Martha." Thomas's voice was low, laced with heavy exhaustion. "I asked the manager at the supply yard for a 3-day extension. He just laughed in my face. Said people like us shouldn't buy what we can't pay cash for." "We'll manage, Tom," Martha replied softly, her tone encouraging. "We'll burn the extra oak logs you hauled in from the woods. We've weathered worse than this." Anna squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her cold palm against her chest. Her heart pounded with a burning resolve that belied her young age. Nothing good ever comes from the Bush family, the townspeople had whispered for years. Anna looked down at her small hands. She made a silent, solemn vow in the dim light of her bedroom, a promise to God, to her parents, and to herself. One day, she whispered to the glass window pane, "I will lift my parents out of this place. One day, no one will ever make my father feel small again." The turn in Anna's life came on an unusually warm afternoon in late May. She was 12 years old, sitting on a sun-baked wooden fence post at the edge of her father's small garden plot. Her fingers were coated with dark earth from helping her mother plant tomatoes. High above, breaking through the pale blue sky, a massive silver commercial jetliner carved its way through the upper atmosphere. It left a clean white contrail behind it, glinting in the afternoon sun as it descended toward Chicago O'Hare, 20 miles to the northeast. Anna stopped working entirely. She tilted her head back, her brown hair falling over her shoulders, her eyes tracking the smooth path of the aircraft as it glided effortlessly over the dusty fields of Oak Creek. To the people of Oak Creek, an airplane was simply a piece of noisy machinery transporting wealthy executives to distant cities they would never visit. But to Anna, that silver dot in the sky represented total freedom. It was a world entirely divorced from broken tools, unpaid bills, cruel whisperings, and cold winter night winds. "She's a Boeing 767, Anna," a quiet voice said beside her. Anna looked down. Her father was standing at the edge of the fence, holding a shovel. His face was stained with sweat and soil, but his eyes were fixed on the sky alongside hers. "How high is it, Dad?" she asked, her voice full of wonder. "About 10,000 feet right now," Thomas replied, taking off his canvas cap and wiping his brow. "She's coming in from somewhere far away, maybe London, maybe Paris, a place where nobody knows what a gravel pit looks like." "Dad!" Anna breathed, her eyes never leaving the silver wing catching the sunset light. "One day, I'm going to work on one of those. I'm going to fly." A week later, while walking back from the town library holding a stack of books about commercial aviation and geography, Anna ran into Mrs. Miller outside the local grocery store. "What are you reading there, young lady?" Mrs. Miller asked, looking down her nose with a patronizing smirk as she loaded bags of expensive groceries into the trunk of her luxury sedan. "Aviation history, ma'am," Anna said politely. "I'm learning about international flights. I want to be a flight attendant when I grow up." Mrs. Miller threw her head back and let out a sharp, mocking laugh that carried across the parking lot. "A flight attendant?" Mrs. Miller cackled, shaking her head. "Oh, sweetie, you need charm, language skills, and background for that kind of job. They don't hire girls whose families live on gravel roads with junk in the front yard. You'd better stick to learning how to operate a cash register at the dollar store down the highway." Anna felt the words sting like salt poured into an open wound, but instead of bowing her head, she looked Mrs. Miller straight in the eye, gave a respectful nod, and walked past her without saying another word. That evening, Anna sat at the weathered kitchen table, laying out her library books under the light of a single yellow bulb. Her father sat across from her, carefully filing the teeth of a handsaw. "Dad?" Anna asked softly. "Is Mrs. Miller right? Do people like us not belong up there?" Thomas set his file down with a deliberate clatter. He looked at his daughter, his eyes burning with intense conviction. "Anna," Thomas said, his voice grounded like an ancient oak tree, "where you start in this life is not your fault, but where you end up is your responsibility. People like the Millers measure a person by the paint on their house and the car in their driveway, but the sky doesn't care who your father is. The sky only respects hard work, discipline, and an honest heart. If you want to fly, you work until your wings are built. Don't ever let a foolish person tell you what God has planned for you." Anna swallowed hard, nodded, and opened her textbook. The journey from the back roads of Oak Creek to the cabin of a major airline was not paved with good luck. It was carved out of sheer, unyielding endurance. Throughout high school, while other teenagers went to football games, movie theaters, and weekend parties, Anna's life was an endless marathon of labor and study. She woke up every morning at 4:30 a.m. to assist her mother with laundry deliveries, picking up heavy canvas sacks of dirty linens before school started. After her classes ended at 3 p.m., she walked 3 miles to a local diner where she worked as a waitress until 10 p.m., sweeping floors, scrubbing grease traps, and wiping down counters. When she finally returned to her small, chilly bedroom at night, she opened her schoolbooks, studying by the light of a desk lamp until her eyes burned with fatigue. Her dedication paid off. Anna graduated from high school at the very top of her class, earning high honors. Yet, when college rejection letters arrived, not because of her grades, but because she could not afford the soaring tuition costs even with basic financial aid, she faced a crushing wall of disappointment. "We can't afford the tuition, Anna," her mother cried softly one night at the kitchen table, clutching a financial aid denial letter. "I'm so sorry, baby. We just don't have it." "It's okay, Mum," Anna said gently, wrapping her arms around her mother's shoulders. "We don't need a shortcut. We just need a way forward." For the next 3 years, Anna worked 3 separate part-time jobs simultaneously. She worked the early shift at a coffee shop, spent her afternoons working as a receptionist at a local repair shop, and spent her evenings night auditing accounts for a small motel off the interstate. Every single dollar she earned was split down the middle. Half went to her parents to help pay off medical bills and keep a roof over their heads, and the other half was saved meticulously in a small steel lockbox under her bed for flight attendant academy tuition and language certification courses. There were nights when her feet were so swollen she could barely take off her shoes, nights when cold discouragement whispered in her ear to give up and accept the forgotten life of Oak Creek. But every time she felt her strength slipping, she looked out her window at the distant, soaring lights of aircraft making their approach to Chicago O'Hare. At 24, Anna finally submitted her application to the elite National Flight Academy in Chicago, one of the most rigorous training centers in North America, with an acceptance rate of less than 3%. The training was brutal. It required mastering complex aviation emergency procedures, aircraft systems, medical first aid, international protocol, and intense physical survival training. Her classmates came from affluent backgrounds, daughters of corporate executives, former college athletes, and worldly travelers who spoke 3 languages effortlessly. Some of them looked down on Anna's plain clothes and lack of personal wealth. "Where did you buy that uniform suit, Anna?" A wealthy classmate named Chloe whispered mockingly in the locker room before an exam. "It looks like it came from a thrift store in 1995. Anna simply buttoned her blazer, checked her lapel pin, and looked up with a serene smile. "It was my mother's," she said softly. "It reminds me of who I'm doing this for." When the 4 months of intense training concluded, the Academy held its formal graduation ceremony in a grand auditorium in downtown Chicago. When the Dean of Aviation took the podium to announce the class valedictorian, the student who had achieved a perfect score on safety evaluations, leadership, and academic rigor, he cleared his throat and looked out at the audience. The recipient of this year's Gold Wings Award for Highest Achievement, the Dean announced, his voice echoing over the loudspeakers, is Anna Bush. In the back row of the massive auditorium, sitting in clean but faded Sunday clothes, Thomas and Martha Bush stood up, their eyes overflowing with quiet tears as their daughter walked across the stage to receive her gold wings. Anna was assigned. Her very first assignment was a domestic flight from Chicago to Miami, operating on a Boeing 737. The air in the crew room at O'Hare was thick with tension, pre-flight safety checks, and the rustle of flight schedules. "You're the new girl from the academy, right?" asked Veronica, a senior flight attendant with 15 years of experience, holding a cup of black coffee and eyeing Anna's gold lapel pin with skepticism. "Look, kid, academy top honors don't mean anything out here on the line. Passengers are rude, delays are long, and nobody is going to baby you because you scored high on a written test." "I understand, Veronica," Anna replied warmly, her voice entirely devoid of defensiveness. "I'm here to support the team and learn. Please tell me whatever you need me to do." Veronica blinked, slightly caught off guard by Anna's genuine demeanor, but gave a quick nod. "Start by checking the emergency equipment in the aft cabin." Throughout the 6-hour flight, which was hit by turbulent winds over Atlanta and packed with frustrated passengers, Anna's performance was nothing short of extraordinary. While other crew members showed visible annoyance at demanding travelers, Anna moved through the aisle with grace and poise. When an elderly passenger suffering from severe arthritis struggled to sit comfortably, Anna retrieved 2 extra pillows from storage without being asked, adjusting them behind the woman's back and speaking to her in a soothing tone. When a young mother with a crying toddler spilled an entire cup of sticky apple juice across the middle aisle, Anna didn't call for a cabin cleaner or wait for someone else to handle it. She immediately retrieved cleaning towels, knelt on the floor in her uniform, wiped the area completely clean, and handed the child a small toy airplane with a bright smile. "Why are you doing all that extra work?" another junior crew member whispered to her near the aft galley while preparing for final approach. "Management isn't watching. It doesn't earn you a bonus." Anna paused, smoothing the front of her apron. "My father always told me that how you do anything is how you do everything," she said softly. "These people are far from home and tired. A little kindness doesn't cost us anything, but it might mean everything to them." By the time the aircraft touched down in Miami, Veronica approached Anna in the jet bridge, her previous skepticism completely gone. "I was wrong about you, Anna," Veronica said quietly, holding out her hand. "You're the real deal. Any flight crew in this airline would be lucky to have you." 3 months into her career at Global Skyways, Anna was assigned to her first long-haul international route, Flight 42, a non-stop night flight from Chicago to Frankfurt, Germany. The aircraft commander for the route was Captain Clinton Scott. Clinton's reputation preceded him everywhere he went. He was a prodigy who had logged over 10,000 flight hours, mastered advanced aerodynamic safety protocols, and achieved the rank of chief pilot at 35, an unprecedented milestone in the airline's 60-year history. Yet, despite his status, Clinton was legendary for his humility. He made a point of knowing the names of every baggage handler, gate agent, and catering worker on his flights. Prior to departure, Clinton held the mandatory crew briefing in the operations room. He stood near the whiteboard in his uniform, his dark hair neatly styled, his warm blue eyes taking in every member of his team. "Good evening, team," Clinton said, his voice deep, grounded, and reassuring. "We have a full house tonight, 280 passengers, mild headwinds over the North Atlantic, and a clear arrival window in Frankfurt. Our primary goal tonight isn't just to get this plane across the ocean safely, it's to make sure every single person on board feels cared for. Let's look out for one another out there." As the crew filed out toward the aircraft, Clinton's eyes brushed past Anna. He noticed the quiet focus in her posture, the neat care she gave to her uniform, and the calm composure in her eyes. During the 8-hour flight across the Atlantic, Clinton stepped out of the flight deck during his scheduled rest period to stretch his legs and grab a coffee in the forward galley. What he witnessed over the next 20 minutes was something he had rarely seen in his 15 years of flying. Near row 14, an elderly man with severe dementia had become panicked and confused by the dark cabin, attempting to unbuckle his seatbelt and leave his seat while the aircraft was cruising at 35,000 feet. The man's wife was near tears, trying desperately to calm him down as other passengers turned to glare in annoyance. Anna was kneeling in the narrow aisle beside the elderly man. She was holding his trembling hand in both of hers. She was singing to him, a soft, calm lullaby, her voice barely above a whisper, completely unfazed by the late hour or the stressful situation. Gradually, the man's frantic breathing slowed. His posture relaxed, and he looked at Anna with a gentle, trusting expression. "You're safe, sir," Anna whispered, smoothing his grey hair gently. "We're up in the sky, and we're taking you home. Everything is going to be all right." Clinton stood in the dim light of the aisle, watching her. He felt a sudden, profound tightness in his chest, a surge of respect that went far beyond professional admiration. He didn't see a flight attendant performing a routine duty. He saw a person of rare character, someone who saw human distress and moved toward it with selfless compassion. Over the next 2 months, Clinton quietly checked the flight rosters. Whenever possible, he requested assignments where Anna Bush was listed as part of the cabin crew. He watched her across dozens of flights and hundreds of hours in the air. He watched her treat the airport cleaning staff with the exact same warmth and respect as she treated top corporate executives flying in first class. He saw her give up her own hot crew meal to a stranded passenger whose flight had been cancelled twice. He saw her stay behind after grueling 12-hour shifts to help exhausted colleagues clean the cabin so they could go home to their families faster. Clinton found himself standing in the flight deck, looking out over the endless ocean of clouds at sunrise, realizing that his thoughts were no longer occupied solely by navigation charts and wind vectors. He was falling in love with a woman he had barely spoken a personal word to. Their relationship did not begin with grand romantic gestures or dramatic declarations. It grew slowly, built upon the solid foundation of late-night quiet conversations, shared values, and mutual respect. It began during a 4-hour winter layover in Boston. A severe blizzard had grounded all flights, leaving Logan International Airport covered in heavy snow. Most of the flight crew had retired to their hotel rooms, but Clinton sat in a secluded corner of the empty crew lounge, reviewing flight manuals under soft lamplight. Anna stepped into the room carrying 2 hot mugs of tea. She paused, seeing the chief pilot sitting alone. "Captain Scott?" she asked softly, her tone respectful. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I can leave if you're working." Clinton looked up, a warm, genuine smile instantly washing over his face. "Please, Anna, sit down, and outside of the cockpit, it's just Clinton." Anna sat in the armchair across from him, placing one of the tea mugs on the side table. "I brought you some chamomile tea. You've been on duty for 12 hours, and I know how much mental energy it takes to manage a flight delay." Clinton set his papers aside, looking at her with appreciation. "Thank you, Anna. That's remarkably thoughtful." They began to talk. What started as professional conversation about flight schedules and route preferences naturally dissolved into something much deeper. They talked about their views on life, their faith, and what drove them. Clinton spoke about his childhood, growing up as the son of an airline mechanic, learning to respect the intricate beauty of machinery and the immense responsibility of keeping people safe in the air. "My father taught me that authority without humility is just tyranny," Clinton said, sipping his tea as snow beat against the window panes outside. "A 4-stripe uniform doesn't make me better than anyone else. It just means I have a higher obligation to serve the people under my care." Anna listened, her heart swelling with an emotion she had never felt before. For years, she had seen powerful men use their position to look down on others, like Richard Miller back in Oak Creek. But Clinton was entirely different. He was strong, immensely accomplished, yet completely grounded in humility. In turn, Anna shared her love for service, though she carefully kept the details of her family's severe poverty locked away, afraid of how it might be perceived. Over the next 6 months, their bond deepened across a dozen cities: London, Tokyo, Paris, and San Francisco. They walked through rain-slicked streets in London, sharing a single umbrella, laughing like old friends as they discussed their favorite books and childhood dreams. They sat in quiet diners in San Francisco at 2 a.m. after long flights, eating warm apple pie and talking about their core values. Clinton learned that Anna loved simple things, the smell of rain on dry soil, classic literature, and traditional country music. Anna learned that Clinton was an avid woodworker who spent his free days building furniture in his small workshop outside Chicago. Never once during those 6 months did Clinton push for anything beyond what Anna was comfortable with. His respect for her was absolute. He courted her mind, her soul, and her character with patience and honor. One evening, while walking along the shores of Lake Michigan during a summer layover in Chicago, Clinton stopped near the water's edge. The skyline of the city glittered behind them, reflecting across the dark, calm water. He reached down and gently took Anna's hand in his. Her fingers were warm, resting in his large, steady palm. "Anna," Clinton said softly, turning to face her, his blue eyes searching hers with intensity. "I've commanded flights all over the world. I've seen some of the most breathtaking sights on this earth, but nothing in my life has ever felt as bright or as true as standing beside you." Anna's heart hammered against her ribs, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "Clinton, you don't even know everything about me. You don't know where I come from." "I know who you are, Anna," Clinton replied gently, raising his hand to brush a strand of hair from her cheek. "I know your heart, I know your kindness, and that is all that will ever matter to me." 4 months into their growing relationship, an unexpected crisis put their professional partnership and unspoken trust to the ultimate test. It was mid-January, and a historic Arctic cyclone hit the Midwestern United States. Flight 712, a Boeing 777, commanded by Clinton with Anna serving as lead cabin attendant in first class, was caught in a sudden patch of severe mountain wave turbulence over the Rocky Mountains while en route to Chicago. The aircraft dropped 3,000 feet in less than 20 seconds. The cabin shook violently as overhead bins popped open and alarms sounded in the flight deck. Inside the passenger cabin, panic erupted. Screams echoed down the aisles as loose items flew through the air. In the midst of the shaking, several crew members were momentarily pinned by unsecured catering carts. Despite the violence of the turbulence, Anna remained completely calm. Securing herself with quick movements, she immediately took command of the cabin audio system. Her voice came over the cabin speakers, not shaky or panicked, but cool, firm, and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your lead flight attendant," Anna announced, her voice cutting through the panic. "We are experiencing severe upper-level wind changes. Our flight deck crew is highly experienced and in complete control of the aircraft. Please remain in your seats, tighten your seatbelts, and take slow, deep breaths. We are going to be completely safe." In the cockpit, Clinton was fighting the control forces, working in synchronization with his co-pilot to stabilize the massive aircraft and descend to a smoother altitude. Hearing Anna's steady, reassuring voice echoing through the flight deck speakers brought a surge of strength to his heart. "Look at her," the co-pilot muttered in awe, adjusting his trim controls. "She's keeping 250 panicking people completely calm back there." Clinton smiled through the intense stress, his hands firm on the control yoke. "That's Anna," he said quietly. "She's unbreakable." 10 minutes later, Clinton skillfully guided the aircraft into smoother air at 24,000 feet, executing a safe divert landing at Denver International Airport. When the aircraft landed safely on the tarmac, the passengers erupted into applause. As travelers deplaned, dozens of them stopped at the forward galley to shake Anna's hand and thank her for her composure during the turbulence. Later that night, in the quiet concourse of Denver Airport, Clinton walked up to Anna. He took her hands in his, looking down at her with intense admiration. "You saved that cabin tonight, Anna," Clinton said softly, his voice trembling slightly from the adrenaline of the flight. "You were the rock everyone leaned on." "We are a team, Captain," Anna replied with a gentle smile. "You held the sky, and I held the people. That's what we do." At that moment, Clinton knew without a doubt that he didn't just want Anna as his colleague, he wanted her as his lifetime partner. Despite their growing love and shared trials, a persistent fear continued to weigh on Anna's heart. She lived in 2 completely different worlds. In one world, she was the respected flight attendant, walking hand in hand with America's most celebrated chief pilot. In the other world, she was still the girl from Miller's Lane. the daughter of a repairman and a laundry worker living in a decaying house in a town that considered her family trash. She had never invited Clinton to her home. Whenever they returned to Chicago after a flight pairing, she insisted on taking the train home alone, claiming her house was too far away or that her schedule was too chaotic. She was terrified that if Clinton saw the old tractor parts in the front yard, the flaking grey paint on the porch, and the poverty her parents lived in, the spell would break. She feared that, despite his kindness, the vast social divide between a wealthy chief pilot and the poorest family in Oak Creek would prove too wide to bridge. One afternoon in late September, fate intervened. Anna was scheduled to operate a domestic turnaround flight to Dallas, but 2 hours before departure, she collapsed in the crew lounge with a sudden high fever and severe exhaustion brought on by a sharp bout of flu. The medical team at O'Hare immediately stepped in, insisting she be sent home to rest for several days. Delirious with fever and unable to drive her old sedan, Anna called her father. Thomas drove 35 miles to the airport in his 20-year-old pickup truck, its engine sputtering, its red paint faded and spotted with surface rust, to pick up his daughter and take her home to Oak Creek. Meanwhile, Clinton, who had just landed from an international route, heard about Anna's sudden illness from the crew scheduler. Filled with concern, he rushed to the crew lounge, only to be told that she had already been picked up by her father. Clinton stood near the operations desk, holding her emergency contact form which listed her home address, 412 Millers Lane, Oak Creek, Illinois. That evening, Clinton didn't head to his modern apartment in downtown Chicago. Instead, he walked straight to his vehicle, a high-end luxury SUV, and set the navigation system for Oak Creek. As his vehicle left the interstate and turned onto the narrow country roads southwest of the city, the landscape changed dramatically. Modern suburban homes gave way to overgrown fields, decaying barns, and gravel pits. Finally, the navigation system announced, "You have arrived at your destination." Clinton slowed the SUV to a crawl, turning onto Miller's Lane. The gravel crunched under his tires as he drove past the large home of Richard Miller, who was standing near his driveway washing his expensive boat. Miller stared at the sleek SUV with open curiosity, wondering what wealthy person had made a wrong turn onto his dirt road. Clinton continued down the lane until the road ended. There stood the Bush home. Clinton stopped the vehicle. He sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, looking at the small house, the patched porch roof, and the old pickup truck parked in the grass. He didn't feel disgusted. He didn't feel superior. In that single moment, all the pieces of the puzzle clicked together in Clinton's mind. He realized why Anna possessed such incredible resilience, why she treated the suffering with such deep tenderness, and why she possessed a soul entirely untouched by vanity or greed. She wasn't remarkable despite her background. She was remarkable because of the fire she had been forged in. His respect for her didn't diminish by a single drop. It exploded into overwhelming reverence. Clinton turned off the engine, picked up a large basket of fresh fruit and flowers he had bought along the way, and stepped out onto the gravel. As he walked toward the leaning porch, the front screen door creaked open. Thomas Bush stepped out onto the porch. He was wearing his work trousers and a plain flannel shirt, his hands rough from decades of labor. He looked at the tall young man in his dark leather jacket, walking up his driveway with steady, respectful steps. "Can I help you, son?" Thomas asked, his voice cautious but steady. "Are you lost?" Clinton stopped at the foot of the wooden steps. He took off his leather jacket, draped it over his arm, and looked Thomas straight in the eye with complete sincerity. "No, sir. I'm not lost," Clinton said, his voice ringing clear in the quiet country air. "My name is Clinton Scott. I work with your daughter, Anna. I heard she was taken ill today, and I came to see if she was safe and to meet the man who raised the most incredible woman I have ever known." Thomas stared at him for a moment. He recognized the name immediately from the quiet stories Anna had told about her work. He saw the pure sincerity in Clinton's eyes. "Come inside, son," Thomas said softly, pushing open the screen door. Inside, the house was small and modest, but immaculate. The scent of pine wood and homemade vegetable soup filled the warm kitchen. Martha stepped out of the bedroom, drying her hands on an apron, looking startled by the presence of the handsome visitor. Anna was resting in her small bedroom down the hall, fast asleep under heavy blankets, her fever finally breaking. "Please, sit down," Martha said nervously, gesturing toward an old wooden kitchen chair that showed years of wear. "I'm afraid we don't have fancy refreshments to offer." "Ma'am, please don't apologize," Clinton said softly. He pulled out the worn wooden chair and sat down without hesitation, placing his fruit basket on the clean tablecloth. "Your home is warm, and your welcome is more generous than I deserve." For the next 2 hours, Clinton sat at that small kitchen table. He ate a plate of simple homemade vegetable soup and warm cornbread that Martha served him, thanking her with genuine delight. He listened intently as Thomas spoke about his years of hard work, his repair business, and the fierce pride he had in his daughter. Never once did Clinton mention his position as chief pilot. Never once did he talk about his income, his luxury apartment, or his status in the aviation world. He spoke only as a man who cared deeply for their daughter. As the evening wore on, Clinton wiped his mouth with a napkin, set his spoon down, and looked at Thomas and Martha. The air in the kitchen grew thick with emotional weight. "Mr. and Mrs. Bush," Clinton began, his voice low, carrying a tremor of emotion. "I didn't just come here tonight to check on Anna's health. I came here because I love your daughter with every fiber of my being. I have traveled the world and I have met thousands of people, but I have never seen a soul as noble, as pure, and as resilient as Anna's." Thomas leaned forward, his hands resting on the table, his eyes fixed on Clinton. Clinton slid forward to the edge of his chair, looked Thomas directly in the eyes, and spoke with honor. "I know I am asking for the most precious thing in your lives," Clinton said softly. "But if you will give me your blessing, I want to spend the rest of my life protecting her, honoring her, and loving her as my wife. I promise you, in my honor before God, that she will never know a day of fear or neglect as long as I draw breath." In the doorway of the kitchen, Anna stood leaning against the frame. She had woken up 20 minutes earlier, drawn by the quiet voices in the kitchen. She had stood in the shadow of the hallway, watching the man she loved, the youngest chief pilot in North America, sit in her family's humble kitchen, eating her mother's soup, listening to her father with deep respect, and asking for her hand in marriage. Tears streamed down Anna's cheeks, not tears of shame or fear, but tears of radiant joy. Thomas looked across the table at Clinton. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. He reached across the simple wooden table and laid his rough hand over Clinton's clean, steady hand. "Clinton," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion, "for 30 years, people in this town have looked at this house and told me I was a failure because I couldn't give my family wealth. But looking at the woman my daughter has become, and seeing the man who has come to ask for her hand, I know I am the richest man in Illinois. You have my blessing, son, with all my heart." Anna stepped out of the shadows, her eyes locked onto Clinton's. Clinton stood up, turned, and wrapped her in his arms as her parents looked on, weeping silently with gratitude. 10 months later, on a golden afternoon in October, the Grand Cathedral of St. James in downtown Chicago was filled to absolute capacity. The wedding was an unprecedented gathering of contrasting worlds. On the right side of the aisle sat the elite of the aviation industry, airline CEOs, senior captains in dark tuxedos, corporate directors, and distinguished guests from across the country. On the left side of the aisle sat cabin crew members, airport baggage handlers, ground crew workers, and the simple, hard-working folks of Oak Creek who had known the Bush family for years. In a quiet back row sat Richard Miller and his wife. They had received an invitation in the mail 3 weeks prior, a formal, gold-embossed invitation to the wedding of Anna Bush and Captain Clinton Scott. They sat in stunned silence, looking around at the vaulted stone ceilings, the roaring pipe organ, and the sea of distinguished guests. The massive oak doors at the back of the cathedral swung open. The trumpet echoed through the vast stone arches. Thomas Bush walked down the long carpeted aisle. He was dressed in a pristine, tailored black tuxedo that Clinton had personally arranged for him. His posture was upright, his head held high, his face radiant with quiet pride. On his arm walked Anna. She took the breath away from every person in the cathedral. Her gown was a masterpiece of classic elegance, pure white silk with delicate lace sleeves, falling into a breathtaking train. She wore no extravagant diamond tiaras or gaudy jewels. Her beauty shone from within, serene and pure, At the altar stood Clinton Scott, dressed in his formal uniform decorated with his chief pilot insignia. His eyes never left Anna as she walked toward him. A single tear escaped his eye, tracing a path down his cheek as he watched his bride approach. When Thomas reached the altar, he placed Anna's hand into Clinton's. "Take care of my girl, Captain," Thomas whispered, his voice trembling with pride. "With my life, sir," Clinton replied softly. The ceremony was a testament to love, humility, and faith. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the applause that erupted within the cathedral echoed like thunder. During the grand reception at the lakefront ballroom, Clinton took the microphone for his speech. He stood beside Anna, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, looking out at the hundreds of gathered guests. "Many people in this room know me as a chief pilot," Clinton said, his voice carrying clearly over the sound system. "They think my greatest achievement was reaching the flight deck of a major airline at a young age, but they are wrong." He turned to look at Anna, his eyes shining with devotion. "My greatest achievement was being worthy of the love of Anna Bush," Clinton continued, turning back to the crowd. "Anna taught me that true strength isn't found in authority, and true wealth isn't found in a bank account. It is found in character, in kindness, and in the willingness to serve others when no one is watching. She brought the light of heaven into my life, and I am the luckiest man alive." Across the room, Richard Miller sat staring down at his plate, his face pale with burning shame, as he remembered every cruel word he had ever spoken to the little girl walking down the gravel road. 6 months after the wedding, Global Skyways hosted its annual Global Aviation Honors Gala in downtown Chicago, a black-tie event attended by international airline executives, government officials, and high-profile donors. Clinton and Anna arrived together, looking stunning in their formal evening attire. As they walked through the grand ballroom, greeting colleagues and executives, Anna caught sight of a familiar face across the room. It was Chloe, the wealthy former classmate from the flight academy who had mocked Anna's thrift store uniform suit years earlier. Chloe was now working as a junior public relations assistant for an international aviation consultancy firm, standing near the catering table holding a stack of event folders. When Chloe saw Anna standing beside the airline's chief executive officer and Captain Clinton Scott, her mouth dropped open in complete disbelief. She recognized Anna instantly, her cheeks flushing with intense embarrassment. Anna excused herself from the conversation and walked gently toward Chloe. Chloe swallowed hard, shifting uncomfortably on her feet as Anna approached. "Anna," Chloe stammered, her voice shaky. I didn't expect to see you here." "I mean, look at you." "Hello, Chloe," Anna said softly, offering a warm smile. "It's so good to see you. How have you been since graduation?" Chloe looked down at her shoes, her previous arrogance completely dissolved. "Anna, I need to say something. Back at the academy, I was awful to you. I made fun of your clothes, your background, and where you came from. I was foolish, and I thought money made me better than everyone else. I am so terribly sorry." Anna looked at Chloe with calm understanding. She reached out and gently placed her hand on Chloe's arm. "Chloe," Anna said gently, "we were both young, and we were both trying to find our place in the world. I forgave you a long time ago. You don't ever need to feel ashamed around me." Chloe looked up, her eyes filling with unexpected tears at Anna's complete lack of bitterness. "You really are different, Anna. You always were." "We all have the power to change, Chloe," Anna replied quietly. "Where we start doesn't define who we become." Watching the interaction from across the room, Clinton felt his heart swell with pride once again. Anna didn't use her elevated position to crush those who had once looked down on her. She used her position to offer grace, healing, and elevation. True love does not content itself with personal happiness. It spills over to transform the world around it. Following their wedding, Clinton and Anna did not spend their combined wealth on flashy sports cars or extravagant international vacations. Instead, they quietly directed their focus toward the place where Anna's journey had begun. Over the next 2 years, an extraordinary transformation took place in the forgotten township of Oak Creek. A non-profit foundation, established quietly by Clinton and Anna, purchased 40 acres of land near the town center. They built the Bush Community and Education Center, a modern facility featuring a library, a computer lab, a youth sports complex, and a fully funded vocational trade school for local young men and women. They established the Thomas and Martha Bush Academic Scholarship, providing full college tuition every year for 10 underprivileged students from rural Illinois who dreamed of pursuing careers in aviation, nursing, engineering, and education. They paved the long roads of Oak Creek, installed modern street lighting, and provided low-interest grants for low-income families to renovate their homes and repair their roofs. Never once did Clinton or Anna put their names on giant signs or seek media attention for their generosity. They performed every act of charity with quiet humility. One freezing afternoon in December, 3 years after the wedding, a heavy knock came at the front door of the renovated Bush family home in Oak Creek. Thomas opened the door. Standing on the porch, trembling in the cold wind, was Richard Miller. His construction business had suffered severe losses during a recent economic downturn, and his health had declined sharply. He looked older, worn out, his former arrogance completely drained from his face. "Thomas," Richard stammered, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, his eyes fixed on the wooden porch floor. I came to talk to you." Thomas stepped back, opening the door wide. "Come inside out of the cold, Richard. Martha has hot coffee on the stove." Richard walked into the warm kitchen, sitting down at the very table where Clinton had sat years before. He clutched a hot mug of coffee in his trembling hands. "Thomas, I don't know how to say this," Richard whispered, tears welling up in his eyes. "For 20 years, I treated you and your family like garbage. I mocked your house, I made fun of your work, and I let my kids laugh at Anna. I thought I was better than you because I had money." He looked up, tears overflowing and rolling down his weathered cheeks. "And yet, my business was failing last month. It was your daughter's foundation that paid off my bank line so I wouldn't lose my house. It was Anna who personally called the hospital board to make sure my wife got her heart medication." Richard buried his face in his hands, weeping openly. "Why did you do it, Thomas? Why didn't you destroy me when you had the chance? Why didn't you get your revenge?" Thomas set his own coffee cup down. He looked at his former neighbor with deep compassion, a compassion forged through decades of patience and quiet faith. "Richard," Thomas said softly, his voice firm and kind, "revenge is a heavy stone that only crushes the person holding it. We didn't want to destroy you. We wanted you to see that a person's worth is never measured by what they own, but by how much love they give away. You don't need to ask for our forgiveness, Richard. You've had it for a long time." Richard sobbed silently, nodding his head, his heart forever changed by a mercy he did not deserve. Spring returned to Oak Creek. The sun shone brightly over the blooming tomato plants in the backyard garden behind the restored Bush family home. The fresh green grass swayed in the soft afternoon breeze, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of flowering cherry trees. Anna sat on the swing on the wide wooden porch, cradling her 6-month-old daughter Clara in her arms. Beside her sat Clinton, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, looking down at his daughter with tenderness. Down in the garden, Thomas was teaching little Clara's older brother how to hold a small wooden spade, his face illuminated by a deep smile that seemed to erase 30 years of pain and struggle. High above, carving its way through the clear blue sky, a silver commercial airliner glided smoothly on its descent toward Chicago O'Hare, its wings reflecting the golden sunlight of the afternoon. Anna tilted her head back, watching the majestic plane glide across the clouds. Clinton leaned down, kissing her forehead gently. "What are you thinking about, my love?" he whispered. Anna smiled, resting her head against his chest, listening to the calm, steady beating of his heart. "I was thinking about the girl who used to sit on that old fence post," Anna said softly, her voice filled with deep gratitude. "I was thinking about how terrified she was that the world would always judge her by where she came from." Thomas walked up the porch steps, wiping his hands on a towel. He looked at his daughter, his son-in-law, and his grandchildren, his eyes bright with profound peace. "Poverty was never our shame, Anna," Thomas said gently, his voice echoing with the timeless wisdom of a life well lived. "Giving up would have been, God doesn't look at the house you start in, He looks at the heart you build while you're inside it." Anna closed her eyes, pulling her baby closer to her chest, holding her husband's hand tightly. The sky above was vast, endless, and wide open, a reminder that no matter how deep the valley of your beginning may be, faith, love, and unwavering humility can carry any soul higher than the clouds. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that your background does not determine your future. And don't forget to tell us in the comments which moment moved you the most.